What is up, Flick fans, and welcome back to my channel. So sorry I took so long to get this video out, but I have watched this movie in increments the entire weekend because I've just been so busy, but we are finally talking about Mudbound. First off, I had to use a lot of my studio equipment for a commercial today, and I actually had to leave it in the building that I shot at, so no green screen today, not even any good special lighting. It's literally me sitting in my kitchen talking about this movie, but I couldn't wait any longer. I really want to talk about it. I love Netflix. I love Netflix movies, so let's talk about the good, the bad, and I will give you guys my score of Mudbound. So Mudbound is directed by Dee Reese and stars a bunch of very talented people. Basically, the synopsis here is two people return from war, from World War II, and they return home to some very racially charged discussions, some confrontations, and this movie does a really good job of following people around and telling different people's points of views. And I always like to start off with the good, so let me start off with this. This movie is probably one of the best Netflix movies that I have ever watched. Actually, I think it's the best. And what I love so much about this movie is we start with our main character, and like I said earlier, we start to shift from point of view to point of view using a method that I'm not a huge fan of. And that's the voiceover. I don't like when voiceover gives exposition in a movie when it's so out of place, but this movie, it's very consistent throughout the entire thing, and I like getting in people's heads, especially during this time period, and especially with dialogue that's just so well constructed. I loved seeing what different thoughts were on these situations, and without any spoilers, this movie gets very intense at times, and it uses the voiceover thing to kind of bring everything together and tie it all in, not a beautiful bow, but tie it all together. It's such an intense watch for such a simple premise, and I said this in my Justice League review, and I'm not comparing these two movies. They're very different, but one thing that I loved in that movie was the relationships between the characters. One thing I love in this movie is the relationships between the characters. That's about the only similarity between those two things, but really that's what carries this film. I mean, you have friend and friend, you have some sexual tension, you have a wife and her husband, and then a wife and there's just so many things here. It's such a layered movie, and it's a watch that, may not watch this movie again, but I'm definitely going to tell people about it. And if you're a fan of this time period in movies, oh man, is this just the prime, wonderful example of how dark, disgusting not this time period, but this generational, just the way that people handled situations in this movie kind of reminds you of everything within the World War II era, and I think it's gross, it's dark, it's called Mudbound, so these characters are constantly walking in the mud. I think Mudbound is another play on how disgusting some people were during this time. I got angry watching this film, and I usually do when it comes to a movie like this. 12 Years a Slave, that one did it. Even Django Unchained, although there's a lot of comedy in that movie. Some people in those movies evoke anger, and it's the same way here, and I'll tell you this, some of the performances, whether it's the good people or the bad people, they were all absolutely fantastic. I can't point out one person that took me out of the movie. Gorgeous cinematography, the movie flowed well, the directing was great. I can see this movie getting nominated for many different... Man, I wish I was in front of my green screen right now, because I could be doing the thing where I'm like moving all over the place talking. This movie just gets me so excited because this is Netflix pursuing the Academy Award level film, and I believe this is the first one. Well, this is the Merowitz Stories. That was a great movie. This is a great movie. This is another one that I could see potentially a nomination for Best Picture. If we're talking about the negatives, I don't have many. There's a point in the movie to where they're doing this storyline. There's many storylines in this film. There's one in particular that I don't love, and it involves a girl with a knife. That's all I'll say. I just feel like it retracted from what we were enjoying about the story up to that point, but it wasn't handled bad. I just didn't like the storyline. Maybe a tighter focus on your end goal. I felt empty about some plot points and some threads that weren't really tied together by the end of the movie. And I hate when movies, and I don't know if many people notice this, but they reuse the same sound bites, so you have the sound of the little girls playing. I know you've heard it before. And there's even a moment where a character is crying in this movie, and that same exact cry, the 30 seconds later, it's and I could tell it's the same one. It feels lazy to me. I feel like you could either record a new sound effect or just not use the same one that we've heard over and over in movies before. But really minor quibbles for a Netflix movie that I think is going to change the game. I think this is a great Netflix film. I think this is a great film in general, and And I'm really sad that I had to watch this movie on my phone in a span of 3 days, watching different scenes. This is a movie that I would love to see on a big screen, that I would love to see on a bigger screen than my phone, but even watching it on my phone, just laying in the bed, watching the last 30 minutes of the movie last night when I was trying to prepare for this review, it really got me emotional, and there were some times when I may or may not have shed a couple of tears. It's a great film. I'm giving Mudbound an 85. One of the better movies of the year. May not crack my top 10, but it's very close. I really enjoyed this movie, guys. So what did you think of Mudbound? Have you checked out my Justice League movie review? Please watch that. I had a great time watching that movie the second time. I think I even enjoyed it more than I did the first time, so that's interesting. Later on this week, I'm ranking the DCEU movies, if there is a DCEU after Justice League's box office performance after this, and then I am doing a spoiler in-depth review of Justice League. Thank you guys so much for watching. You're the absolute best, and I will catch you later.